Welcome back to Afternoon Live. It's believed by some that the veil between the living and the dead is thinnest on Halloween, allowing spirits of the dead to roam the earth. So here with Ghostbusting and Psychic Insights, we welcome back world-renowned psychic therapist and the author of The Secret That's Holding You Back, Vincent Genna. Good thing you're here just in time.
Oh, it's good to see you too, Hannah, and I'm so spooked out on this typical time of year, you know what I mean?
You're in the thick of it. Okay, so is it possible that we have maybe folks from the other side who are wanting to communicate with us this time of year?
Oh my goodness, is it possible? It's impossible to stop them from trying to communicate at this time of the year. The interesting thing, Hannah, is that there are several parts of the world that celebrate their own holiday at this time. There's the Day of the Dead celebration coming up from Mexico, Dia de los Muertos. We've got Todos Santos, which is the whole idea of the spirit realm. We've got all different places, All Hallows Eve. It was a spiritual or religious holiday, actually, that's coming up here. And that's all because of the time of year that it is. First of all, it is a harvesting time for the winter crops. So everybody is gathering all of their important crops that's going to get them through the entire winter. Otherwise, there's no food, right? And so they celebrated that as they celebrate all things like that and good things like that, right? Like Thanksgiving, that's coming up with the same type of thing, harvesting food. And so they also included, which I find really interesting, a celebration of the dead at the same time, because there was a superstition back then, and you know, I've told you 1,000,001 times that our species is so superstitious, right? That if they didn't celebrate the dead at this time, they were going to destroy the crops and ruin the crops and keep them from being able to harvest the food that they needed to get them through the winter. Oh my God, you got spooky stuff coming up on the screen right now. I hate this person. It's spirit. So it started that way. Okay. Now, what happened is traditionally, after everybody harvested their crops, Hannah, they started making some of their own foods, and they did share them with their neighbors and the other farmers around. Whatever the corn that they harvested, they made some corn pudding or corn pies and foods like that, or apples or anything like that, right? So they started to share. But then the adults, as usual, particularly men. I don't know what they're thinking or what this species is about here. But men would put masks on and go knocking on the doors of their neighbors so that the neighbor wouldn't know who they are. And they would say, give us some of your treat. Otherwise, we're going to do something to you and give you a trick. Right? Aha. So doesn't that sound familiar? Trick-or-treating started, but it was with the adults. That was crazy, right? So, but they didn't necessarily have their own farm or any goods, but they wanted to make sure they got some of the treats as well. Well, then you know it's going to get passed on to the kids some way, don't you know that?
Right.
So what happens with the kids, they started to make it a little bit more spooky. So now, instead of just regular plain old cotton mask thrown over their heads, it was a sheet, and they'd walk around as ghosts and spirits because, my goodness, they were celebrating the dead anyway, so they might as well pretend that they were dead and they were zombies and they were werewolves and everything and monsters, and they would go through. Well, you know what that all does to the spirit realm? They love that type of This is like, hey, we can go spooking and nobody would know. They'll turn around and think that it's one of the kids trick-or-treating when really it is. It's old grandma from the past that looks horrible, that's been dead for 100 years, and she's coming around now and haunting you. So, as long as everybody had a celebration with this, and as long as everybody was getting along with this, it was all okay. But everybody started getting into, you know, the mediumship part and talking with deceased dead ones and then paying attention to the other people's holidays and celebrations. Do you know they believe over in Mexico, the whole reason why they celebrate the Day of the Dead, okay? Yes, religion always told you to pray for those in purgatory, but also to pray for those saints and pray for asking for guidance. That's where All Saints Day came in. That's another holiday, which happens to be on my birthday. But at this time of year, you just pray for the deceased, right? And make sure that they're resting in peace. But down in Mexico, they wanted to make sure that grandma wasn't spooking them and coming around. So they made altars for the deceased. They would pray for them. They would celebrate them. And it was all in hopes that they left the living alone.
Okay, interesting.
Yes, that is the funny part of the whole thing. And then there were other societies and cultures all over the world that did their own celebrating for very similar reasons, some a little bit more superstitious than others. But that's how this time of year came about. And what's really interesting, the same time of year over in Eastern India, they celebrate Diwali, which is the celebration of light. So put light in the world rather than negative into the world. And it kind of balances out the celebrating the dead and warding off the negative and creating all of this spooky stuff behind us. So we're going to counter that with peace, with love, with light, because show your inner light, that whole kind of idea. And so some of the cultures wound up balancing out all this spooky stuff, but the spooky stuff is fun. Don't you think so, Hannah? Do you still go out trick-or-treating at all?
I take my kiddos, but only small doses of spooky because I still get scared of the really freaky stuff.
Do you really?
Oh, completely.
I get you. I know it. You know what? And you don't want to be carrying around anything, an amulet or something like that, that's going to ward them off. Just your own inner belief. But when somebody comes out and go boo, and they're wearing a real horrible mask, yeah, that could be spooky too. I did that to my wife when we were first dating. I knocked on the door on Halloween. She was by herself, and I had this old spooky man's mask on, and she answered the door, and there I am standing at the door, and she screamed so loud she'll never let me forget it. But now it's good that you have a kid because that's the way to get candy. I don't have a way to get candy anymore unless I go to my grandkids'
trust
house
me,
and
I will ship you our surplus because I've got these 2 kids, and I know their bounty is going to be plentiful this Halloween.
Oh, I love that. I always loved Halloween candy. I really did. But everybody should have a really good time on Halloween because it's supposed to, again, be joyous. A joyous time of the year, a joyous celebration. It's only those teenagers that get into trouble and start egging houses and toilet paper and trees.
None of that stuff.
They ruin none of that stuff. Let's have some good, safe trick-or-treating or trunk-or-treating that's been going around, okay?
All the fun things.
Really good. Absolutely.
Great to see you, my friend. I hope you have a wonderful holiday. We'll see you soon.
See you again, Hannah. You take care. And
all right. Happy Halloween. Vincent's book again is The Secret That's Holding You Back, and we'll have more information on our website at katu.com. We'll be right back with more Afternoon Live right after this.